The wheelchair has become a familiar and visible representation of disability and diversity in our society. We see it on signs, in advertisements, and in store displays. While the wheelchair is the universal symbol of access and disability, it is also the universal stereotype of disability. In fact, only about 10% of all individuals with disabilities are wheelchair users. Over 45 million are not. These people are living with hidden disabilities. Generalized anxiety disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, traumatic brain addictions in remission, sickle cell anemia, Epstein-Barr, bipolar disorder, multiple fibromyalgia, heart disease, depression, irritable bowel syndrome, diverticulitis, diabetes, cancer.
I was actually very pleased to be asked to talk about this topic because it's one that's been close to my heart for a long time. Back in high school, one of my very best friends was severely paralyzed from polio, and I still look back with great fondness in that friendship, and we're still in communication, and for a while he was also my boyfriend. So I've always been very favorably disposed to being active on this issue, but I hadn't had much interaction with on the issue of the invisible disabilities until I came to Stony Brook. And when I started working in the Affirmative Action Office, somebody who was in the Disabled Student Services Office at the time sent me a study showing, comparing how the people who had various kinds of learning disabilities and the people who didn't did when they were given extra time on tests. And I know this is one of the issues that bothers faculty a lot. They say, well, anybody would do better if they had more time on the test, so why should some people get more time than others? And this was a really interesting study. I thought, I'm a psychologist, so I saw that it was well done. Because the people who didn't have the particular learning disability that requires more time didn't do better when they were given more time, but the people who did have the disability did. Basically, I think the people who didn't have the disability started changing their answers and overthinking their responses and so on, and so it didn't really help them to have more time.
I had 2 exams back to back, and I needed time and a half on each of them. I asked my professors if one could be moved earlier or later, and I was armed with a letter from DSS, but they refused. I told my mother about my predicament, and she immediately went to see my professors. She told them that even though I looked normal, I had cancer. When the doctors first told me, I panicked, and I've been having panic problems ever since. The chemotherapy has had terrible effects on me, but I still want to continue my education. I guess because I look normal, my professors refused my request. But after my mother spoke to them and told them about the situation, they were very kind, and they made the arrangements immediately.
The professor called me and was very angry that I didn't share with him the seriousness of the situation in my letter or email. Disability Support Services can't share the contents of medical documentation, and I asked him to remember this the next time he got a letter from us, and trust that we have documentation that will justify the accommodations we request. Disability counselors are trained to interpret the law, and DSS wants to assist you to remain in compliance with the law. I'm Joanna Harris, Director of Disability Support Services here on campus, and I come with the support of the President and the Provost. We have prepared this video to increase awareness of the disabilities that you can't see. I urge you to listen to true stories from Stony Brook students and some comments from fellow faculty members.
The name Office of Disability Support Services is really important. The function of this office is not just to support the individual, but to support the entire campus community here at Stony Brook in dealing with disabilities. And the entire community includes the faculty as well. The office is there to help faculty deal with questions of disabilities. The office is professionally staffed, and the job of this staff is to determine whether students are disabled, how they are disabled, and how the faculty can best accommodate these students.
Professors sometimes say, you don't need to take your tests somewhere else. All your grades are A's. Because I don't look disabled, faculty is clueless about understanding that my good grades are a direct result of DSS accommodations.
I wanted to take a minute as a fellow member of the faculty to introduce you to the asset that the DSS office represents. I want to do that by talking to you candidly about two problems that we as faculty members face. The first is the issue of practicality. I teach a rather large course, nearly 500 students. And when I was first approached by the DSS office several years ago, my first thought was that the burden of accommodating the needs of these special students would be so large that it would interfere with my capacity to teach the large majority of students. I quickly found, however, that the members of the DSS staff are extremely sophisticated and experienced professionals. They can help you accommodate the needs of these students at a very modest cost.
I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and started on medication. I was also referred to Disability Support Services, DSS, with documentation describing my disability and suggested accommodations. I had no idea I had a common mental disorder that can be easily treated with medication and psychotherapy. In the past, I would describe myself as an intelligent an extremely overconscientious individual who tended to worry about things too much. Perhaps the stress of studying in a foreign country brought this on. I don't know.
I always get to class 10 minutes early. Exceptionally punctual, eager to learn. No, not really. None of those. I get there because I have to have my seat. 4th row, first seat in. That's my seat. I have to sit there. I have always sat there. That's my seat. What if I get to class and someone is already sitting there? Sometimes I try to force myself to sit somewhere else, but usually I just walk out. Next time I'll get there 15 minutes early, maybe even 20.
It pains me to think about growing up as a youngster, attending New York City public schools, and the number of young people who probably had invisible disabilities, but at that time, we didn't have the knowledge, we didn't have the science, and we didn't have the understanding to effectively diagnose these youngsters. I can recall many of my friends who had reading difficulties. It was embarrassing for them to read aloud, which became a behavior problem. Many of the young people were put into classes as examples of students who people just simply called dumb. And as I think back on that, it's a very painful reality. And so I'm so grateful that we have arrived in this country with a growing sensitivity and a growing understanding of invisible disabilities.
In the 27 years I've been teaching here, and the last 3 of which I've been Vice Dean for Academic Affairs at the School of Medicine, I've learned 2 lessons about handicaps. First, that we all have them. Everybody has them. And whether or not they are expressed or invisible depends on the background, the circumstances in which you're working. For some of us, the lucky ones, the handicaps phase in and out. For others, they don't. The other thing is, in my job at the medical school, I don't want to waste resources. And the fact of the matter is, we can't afford to waste resources. So my job is to help people with handicaps be successful in spite of or sometimes because of those handicaps. That's the job of a good educator and certainly the job of a good dean.
The second issue that occurred to me, and I'm sure it will occur to you, is fairness. That is, are students who come through the DSS office in fact being given an unfair competitive advantage to the rest of the student body? What you'll find if you take, as I did, a few minutes to examine the issue, is that the real situation is precisely to the contrary. That is, the small accommodations that we make to these students simply make it possible for them to compete effectively with the large majority of students. So in conclusion, I strongly urge you to reach out to the helpful professional staff of the DSS office and make use of the remarkable asset that they represent.
One of the episodes I've had recently really has brought this home to me about how widespread the invisible disabilities are on our campus, and I imagine on everybody's campus these days. I was teaching a very small class for me, not a 100-person class, so I only had about 25 students, and I think because of that the students felt more comfortable about coming to see me and telling me what some of their problems were. And over a period of about 2 weeks, I had 5 different students come to see me, and during our discussion it came out that they were coping with bipolar or unipolar disease. That is, they were manic depressive or depressed. So as these 5 young women came to see me, each of them was very distressed, really embarrassed, really apologetic about what was happening to them. They all had notes from DSS, and they all needed extra time for various projects and so on. But what struck me was that each of them said, "I'm the only one like this, and I'm probably, you never had anybody like this." And by the time the 5th one came to see me, I started laughing. But what struck me was, okay, this 25-person class, 5 people have this one particular problem and presumably other people have other problems. So at least that means that 20% of my class was having a really serious invisible disability issue. And presumably it's not something unique to this class. There wasn't anything about this class that would have drawn people with this disability. So that means that in most of my classes, probably 20% of the class is having a problem. And most of your classes, of everybody's classes, would be in the same situation. Most of the time they won't tell you about it, and the most you know is you get that little note from the disability support service people, and they ask you to do something. But and probably in a larger class that's all I would have gotten. I would never have known what was going on with my students. But I guess I want to urge you to, when you get those notices, to really take them seriously, because you have no idea what's going on with people.
We've told you that 1 in 5 of your students may have a disability. Look at your family and circle of acquaintances to see if this bears out to be the truth. This is one minority group that any of us can join at any given moment in our lives. I encourage you to visit our website and consider us a resource for your work. You can call me at 632-6748.
I'm Bob McGrath, the provost at Stony Brook University. Stony Brook is a place for learning and discovery. Unfortunately, some of our students, because of a disability, have a harder time learning than others. If these students go unassisted and unadvised, the university may find itself liable for non-compliance with laws set up to protect the rights of the disabled. Individual faculty may find themselves at risk in a civil lawsuit. But most importantly, these students will have missed the great opportunities here to get a wonderful education. If you think you have students who may have some sort of disability, I strongly urge you to send them to the DSS office. The recommendations of the DSS office will allow you and the rest of the university to help these students succeed. By your action, the university, you, the faculty member, and the student will all benefit very much. Thank you.